Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Oklahoma, Missouri roster battle, going position group by position group, stacking these two teams up until a rivalry, a budding rivalry in the landscape of college football. I'm fired up to get into this one. The first rule of the roster battles: let it fly in the comments section, right? Whether you agree with the boys, whether you disagree with the fellas, whether you're mixing it up with the opposing fan base. That's the beauty of these roster battles. It's the beauty of college football as a whole, especially when you're talking about a rivalry like Oklahoma and Missouri, which I'm certainly here for. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. It's been a blast doing these deep dives into all of these programs during the off season. The amount of support you guys continue to show to the fellas truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, let it fly in the comment section. I already have some controversial takes that I know I'm going to get some heat for in the comment section. That's the beauty of it, Dill. Let's get into it. Let's start at the quarterback spot. Brady Cook, Jackson Arnold. Who you taking?
I think it's got to be Brady Cook now. And obviously you love the potential of Jackson Arnold, but I think the progression Brady Cook's made from in 2022, I mean, he was grinding yards out. It was kind of ugly, to be quite frank, but they were figuring out ways to move the ball okay. And then last year, I think you still see that gamer in him. You see that ability to make plays, do things out of the pocket and do some of that. But I think you saw his polish as a quarterback come a long way, where he didn't necessarily need to play like a, quote, gamer. It was very fundamentally sound football, wasn't turning the ball over a whole lot, very accurate with the ball, getting it downfield. I think he had a huge step up here, and I think I expect big things.
When you talk about Brady Cook, he's a guy that I don't know if he'll be a first-round NFL draft pick, but if you're asking me certain quarterbacks across the country that you want on your team to win you football games, Brady Cook's on that short list. And that's why I'm also going Brady Cook. Now, a prerequisite to this conversation is we run this episode back in early November when these two teams are going to square off. This conversation might look a little bit different because the Oklahoma fans know that I am extremely high on Jackson Arnold. But as we said early June, you have to go with Brady Cook. I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. They're getting into a very interesting conversation, and that's the wide receiver room. And I think I'll start with saying Luther Burden, in my mind, is the best wide receiver on this football field. I think there's a very good argument that he's the best wide receiver in the country. That being said, I think a lot of people are sleeping on Deion Burks coming over from Purdue for the Oklahoma Sooners. I think that is a true wide receiver one. I think he's arguably a top 10 wide receiver in the country as well. This is where the conversation gets interesting. What wide receiver room would you take? Missouri, Oklahoma, two really good groups. I'm going to go Oklahoma. And I think you got Deion Burks as your wide receiver one, but what separates these two wide receiver rooms in my mind is I just think you have a little bit more firepower as a wide receiver room as a whole, but more importantly, versatility. You have your big bodies like Nick Anderson that can work vertically down the field, 17.8 yards per catch last year. Andrew Anthony, coming back from injury, was a wide receiver one for Oklahoma before the injury. You got some speedsters and Jaquez Petaway. You throw in a guy like Farouk. I just look at this Oklahoma wide receiver room, so many ways they can attack offenses. I like Theo Weiss, Mookie Cooper, Speedy Johnson, but I'm going to lean Oklahoma here in the wide receiver room. Don't feel good about it.
Yeah, and I think the crucial flaw in your kind of logic is that you're very much sleeping on Johnson and Manning. I think these are two very interesting young players. You kind of look, I mean, top line, I can maybe see it again. I do really like Luther Burden quite a bit more than anyone on this field, maybe anyone on the country, frankly, at that wideout spot. And I think that carries some weight. But I mean, Mookie Cooper and Theo Weiss, I just don't think are giving up that much to those second-tier guys maybe on Oklahoma, if anything at all. So I'm going Missouri. I think when you have that guy in Luther Burden who is, I mean, so good tracking the ball down the field, can catch and run at a really high level, runs really good routes, just a very almost perfect wide receiver in a certain sense.
And he's used so exceptionally
good too. I don't know.
He's used so you don't know. Well, I'm going Oklahoma. Now, he's used so exceptionally too. As I kind of interrupted you, hey, we've gotten some feedback in the comment section. I interrupt you too much, Dill. I'm going to work on that. I apologize. Let's move to the running back room. And let's talk about I think Missouri did a really good job in the transfer portal. Marcus Carroll, Nate Noel coming in through the portal. I'm going to go Oklahoma in the running back room. I think Gavin Sawchuk is probably the best running back on the field. You start talking about even true freshmen, Taylor Tatum coming in for Oklahoma. I think they're deep. I think they got some top-end talent. I like Marcus Carroll, Nate Noel, but I'm going to go Oklahoma in the running back room.
Yeah, I'd go Oklahoma too. I think, again, you kind of see Gavin Sawchuk. You don't really have any questions about him as a true running back. One, very versatile, can do kind of everything. And then you fill it in with some really interesting young guys too. I just think a deeper room, better top end talent, in my opinion, with Sawchuk. I think overall Oklahoma is a step ahead of Mizzou.
Going to the offensive line, I think this one is pretty straightforward. I think it's Missouri. And I think Oklahoma did a really good job in the transfer portal, kind of filled in that
They got that line to confident for sure. I don't think you're like scared, like, oh, what are we going to look like when we step on with the big boys? I think they'll be confident, but Missouri is like a great offensive line.
Yeah, early January, that was a massive question mark for me with this Oklahoma program. I think they made some really good moves in the portal, but I don't think a lot of Oklahoma fans would argue with this either. I mean, obviously, Caden Green coming over from Oklahoma, Missouri, kind of the catalyst of this rivalry. But talk about Marcus Bryant coming over from SMU. I think he's an NFL caliber left tackle. Talk about Armand Membu at the right tackle spot. One of the best offensive tackles, not only in the SEC, but in the country. A ton of experience on the inside of the offensive line. Though we've said it. Why are we believing in this Missouri team? It is because this offensive line, to go along with Brady Cook and Luther Burden, it's a really, really good unit for Missouri on the offensive side of the football. Going to the defense, let's start with the defensive line. I'll give you the T-box here. Oklahoma, Missouri, who are you taking?
Man, I like Oklahoma. And there's a part of me that like looks at some Missouri guys like Chris McClellan, Zion Young, some of these Darius Smith. I mean, transfers who you haven't seen a ton yet. I think Zion Young and Chris McClellan, frankly, need to develop better. Their previous schools, in a sense, seem like they failed them in a little bit. Yeah. I think those two are really talented players. Darius Smith, you saw in the spring game, look really good. But then I look at Oklahoma. I mean, it's deep. I like what they did in the transfer portal, bringing Dominic Williams to go with DeJoun Terry. That is a really, really good power combo in that middle. And then you look at the edge of play. I think you're really comfortable with Ethan Downs is, and then you're looking at some of these young guys like R. Mason Thomas and PJ. If those guys play really well, like you're looking at one of the better defensive lines in the SEC, I think.
I think what separates them is I think they kind of win in both. Top end talent, I think, leans Oklahoma. I think also you look at the depth. Now, I think it's worth mentioning another kind of rivalry butter, Williams-Nwaneri coming in as a true freshman for Missouri. I do really like Johnny Walker as well. I don't think this Missouri defensive line is bad by any means, but I look at this Oklahoma defensive line and it becomes clear that Brent Venables has built this program from the inside out. And on this defensive line, it is absolutely loaded with not only NFL talent, but there's 12 guys that you think can play for Oklahoma, including some true freshmen and Jaden Jackson and David Stone. I think another interesting name to kind of throw into that list of high upside guys, Caden Woolard coming from the MAC. This is a guy that has a ton of length, a ton of juice rushing off the edge. I look at this Oklahoma defensive line, probably one of the better units in the SEC. Going back to the linebacker room, I'll start this one out. I'm going to go Oklahoma. I do like Missouri's linebacker room, but I think when you have one of the best linebackers in the country, if not the best in Danny Stutzman, then you start talking about Kip Lewis or Lewis Carter or Kobe McKenzie or Jaron Kanik. I think you have your stud in Danny Stutzman. I think you have some young talent that I think is going to take that step in 2024. Give me the Sooners at the linebacker spot.
Yeah, and you do. I kind of agree with you for the fact that, again, I think Danny Stutzman is the best linebacker in this whole game on that field whenever they play. And then you kind of look, you are pretty deep with some young guys. And frankly, I think the guy who plays with Stutzman needs to play better. There's part of me that looks, I kind of trust the second linebacker right now slightly more in Missouri in Tristan Newson. I think Chuck Hicks and Tristan Newson are really, really kind of comparable players. So I think you got two really solid guys you can rely on. Corey Flagg is an interesting one coming from Miami. I do think you have a little bit more high upside with that second guy, and whoever plays it, I think needs to play better because, frankly, I didn't think that position was good enough given how talented they are. I think you feel more comfortable that something's going to happen.
Shout out me biting my tongue, not interrupting. Going to really do a good job of that. Now, I do think that it's worth noting. I just trust Brent Venables to kind of find another guy. I mean, whether it's Jaron Kanik, whether it's a guy like Kobe McKenzie or Lewis Carter, I look at that and say one of those guys is going to step up as the running mate with Danny Stutzman. Let's go to the secondary. And I'm going to give you the hot seat first because I know whatever one you're going to take, you're going to get some heat in the comment section for. Missouri, Oklahoma secondary, two really good units. Who you got in the back end?
And I'm going Missouri, and I know they lose Abram Drain and Rackstraw. Those two are obviously excellent football players, but I think you kind of like Drayden Norwood's back. Charleston Joseph played a fair amount. Toriano Pride coming from Clemson is one of the more talented cornerbacks in the country. And I think, frankly, what's the kicker for me is I really trust what this unit's doing. Like, I trust the structure of this unit. I trust how they developed that unit. I mean, they played so well last year, I thought, so well coached. I think these guys are just in a better – I mean, Oklahoma, I like that they changed it up. I think bringing in Zach Alley was huge because something had to change. That secondary for how talented it is in Oklahoma really underperformed at a high level, I thought. So I'm going Missouri because mainly I think the talent's better than people think. I think just because they lose some guys doesn't mean like they suck all of a sudden. I think they're still very good. And I trust how they've been developed a little bit more in Oklahoma right now.
In the spirit of the roster battle, Dill, I had slight lean to Missouri in my notes. I'm going to go Oklahoma. And I think it's just to provide a little bit of an argument here. I look at Oklahoma in the safety spot and say I think they have the better safety unit. Billy Bowman Jr., Peyton Bowen. I think that's really worth noting is Zach Alley is going to allow these safeties to have their handprints all over this football game. And I think that is a massive aspect for Oklahoma in the secondary. Then you look at the cornerback spot. Gentry Williams, when healthy, played some really good football. Woody Washington has just played a ton of football. And then you start looking at kind of that cheetah position. I mean, Spears Jennings or Kendall Dolby. I like the talent. I think you make a really good point. I think Missouri's played better in the secondary. I think Oklahoma's the more talented team on paper.
And so I don't totally disagree with that, frankly. I agree that Oklahoma, look, really talented, have some interesting young guys. Obviously, you throw like guys like Bowen in the mix and some of those other younger dudes. But I just feel really comfortable with the way Missouri's developed up through that position. I really think that the guys who are filling in, I mean, Marvin Burks, I thought played pretty decent football as a true freshman. Very interesting young guy. Even Trayvez Johns. I mean, they have guys who played a fair amount. I thought played really well. And again, I think a lot of it is that development in the secondary has been elite.
Yeah, not with Zach Alley, though. That's why I'm going with the Sooners.
That's a big thing, but you got to prove it to me. It's like, well, are we just going to say Jackson?
Hey, maybe we'll just run this one back early November. We'll just run it back before the game. All right. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.